Blake, I'm going to do you a huge favor.
You're finally going to buy me that $2,000 massage chair?
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who thought all you had to do was put it in the budget and then you'd get the money. And I'm here with my co-host who keeps cutting my budget, Toby Walters.
First of all, massage chairs usually cost a lot more than $2,000.
Are you for real? I was just guessing.
I think they can easily be $5,000 or $6,000 for a good one. They're really expensive.
There are people in the world that spend that on a chair.
Yes. You kind of think of it as a hot tub, Blake. I know you absolutely love hot tubs, but instead people put their money in a massage chair rather than the hot tub. Kind of same effect, very different experience.
That's just selfish. You can't share a massage chair with your friends at the same time. And you also can't get electrocuted and die in a massage chair like you can a hot tub. This is inefficient.
So I wonder if they're like massage love seats where two buddies can
Nope. Pick a different joke.
So, Blake, I went to the SALT conference recently, and I got to engage and interact with a lot of our friends out there in the production community. It's a really good time. One thing I aim to do is to find a better fit for you as far as, a company to work with, because obviously it's just not working here at Church Gear.
Oh, yeah. We need to, speed along this process. We need to figure out another, massage chair for me to sit in with someone.
Yeah. So, it's hard just approaching all those brands, all those churches to say like, hey, you want a Blake? You want a Blake? You want a Blake? So I engaged the services of Slingshot Group to do a candidate search for you. So apparently, unfortunately, you are as unhireable as I am.
Dang it.
I know. So I feel like, was it like Misery Loves Company? Like two wrongs make church gear?
Two idiots make a podcast.
Yes, that's what we should call this thing. Two idiots make a podcast. So I got an opportunity to talk with our friends at Slingshot Group, so Brian and Phil, and we did a live episode at SALT, and we talked about some of the reasons, should I stay? Should I go? What are some good reasons to consider a new job in church production? What are some of the wrong reasons? What should I look for in a job? So, Blake, how long do you think you would survive somewhere else with like a normal straight-laced culture?
I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to have time that's negative. Like, is there negative time, like -7 seconds, -5 seconds?
It's quite possible.
As I'm saying negative, I'm realizing it sounded like naked. I mean, I can't even make it here.
So just like everybody, you wish, I am worth X amount of money. Like you might think I should be marketing, Apple, or what's one of your favorite brands in the world?
Smart Food Popcorn, Toby.
Smart Food Popcorn.
I'm consistent.
So you're thinking I should be marketing Smart Food Popcorn for like, what do you want to make? $1 million a year? Is that enough for you?
They say don't get high on your own supply. I could never work for Smart Food. I'd be dead in 5 minutes with all that.
But because of the culture and the nonsense that is allowed to exist here at Church Gear, what kind of percentage do you describe as the Church Gear discount?
Don't tell Toby. We can't tell people this live on air. I make $12,000 a year. All right. Look, I'm getting by.
Yeah. So Blake, if you strongly consider the culture you're part of, the mission you're part of, and just the fact that you get to be yourself, I mean, that's shockingly valuable in how much money it's worth.
Money is a number.
I know.
It's just not the only number.
So we're going to head out to the SALT conference live at Irving Bible Church, and I'm with Brian and Phil. And so let's see what they have to say about, job decisions and all that kind of stuff.
Wait, you did another one without me?
Yep. Okay, guys, we are here live at the SALT conference, live-ish. It's during one of the main sessions, and we've hidden up above the lobby so we can have a bit of peace and quiet, but you can kind of hear still some of the background noise. I'm here with Brian Taylor and Phil Bowdle from Slingshot Group. Guys, welcome to the Church Gear podcast.
Honored to be here. Thanks for having us.
Do you feel like you have arrived now?
100%.
Yeah.
This is the pinnacle, definitely the pinnacle of my morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except you're holding your favorite coffee. So
I am holding my favorite
I'm
coffee.
happy to be a pinnacle above your favorite coffee.
You are. And the combination of the two is elation. Just absolute elation. Yeah. Euphoric.
And tell us what are you guys here for? You guys are both teaching sessions
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Tell us what your sessions
both
are on.
here. So I did a session yesterday called Creative Ministry Manifesto, just kind of challenging creatives and out of the burden for creatives of some of the things we're doing in creative ministry just is not getting us where we want to go. And so just trying to challenge people with 5 things that hopefully will help them rethink how they lead themselves, how they lead out and work with others and try to build a better future for creative ministry. And then today I'm doing a talk on creating a weekly rhythm, which is not the most sexy of titles. But the team at SALT was like, people are constantly trying to figure out, how do I make the most of the time that I've got when I don't have enough of it? So just trying to get super practical on that. But this is a great conference, amazing people here. And yeah, honored to be here.
Yeah. And so my sessions yesterday and today, yesterday was in the leadership track. We're talking about finding the right leaders and keeping them, which is a significant challenge in today's world in ministry, both on the volunteer side and on the staff side. So we spent some time digging into how to do that well, what a strong leadership pipeline looks like. And today I get to work with some worship leaders specifically talking about how to train volunteers in worship ministry well. So I'm, I've been a worship pastor for 20 some years. Those are my people. So I'm excited to sit down and have some time workshop.
And for today's session, you're going to be bringing the bass. You've got that.
I do have
raspy voice. It's like Phoebe from Friends. Remember that?
Yeah, you do.
You're just a little jealous. That sounds good.
Yeah, if any of our listeners confused who is who, Brian went out this morning and did some primal screams just to get that raspiness in his voice because he's like, I got to shine above Phil.
This is
already done. Yeah.
And I'm just going to lean into it.
Absolutely, as you should.
I'm just going to lean into it.
So
you should listen with headphones.
I am right now, and it is delightful. So normally we start our episodes with 5 truths and a lie, which usually are provided by the guest, but I've provided them for you guys today. So I have 5 truths and a lie about my experience interviewing with churches through a Slingshot search.
Oh, fun.
So you guys get to decide which one of these is the lie. So here we go.
Buckle up.
Number 1, Monty Kelso, the co-founder of Slingshot, told me to bring my wife on interviews with me so I'd actually have a chance of getting hired.
That's definitely true. Yeah. All right, next.
A church in California said they would not hire me because I was too serious.
Okay.
Noted. As a boy from California, living in Texas, the very first job Slingshot put me up for was in Minnesota. Next, in response to one church job possibility, my wife said to me, I'm not going and you can't make me.
That one might feel true.
Next, having not eaten for 16 hours, I sat in complete silence while the pastor and lead pastor, I might specify, ate his meal served on a silver platter to him right in front of me. When he was done, he wiped his mouth, looked up at me, and said, so do you want this job? You don't even know how to respond to that one.
That one I don't know.
I'm hoping
Jesus, let that be the lie.
And finally,
or let it be 20 years.
I strongly considered leaving the U.S. to take a worship leader position in Costa Rica. Okay, guys, what is the lie?
Hold on. So, the lies. This is
There's only one lie.
In your Slingshot. These are all through Slingshot, or this is just your interviewing? Please say it's just because you're just interviewing, because some of this doesn't sound like people we'd work with.
I think a couple of these were not specifically Slingshot.
Okay,
it was
great.
Same era, like, churchstaffing.com.
Perfect.
We'll put them on them.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. That's good.
Good. Because you're saying stuff and I'm like, whoa. Please let it be a lie. What do you think, Phil?
I'm wondering if we can have a follow-up question of, can you sing something
Oh,
for us real quick?
Okay.
Like that way we could kind of judge the last question.
That's great.
It's kind of like,
just give off
call
the
a friend,
cuff,
Totally.
if I have some
Come
reggae in my voice or something, or
just-
some, if I'm Duolingo and can do it in Spanish, no.
okay. All right. Then I'm going with that as the lie.
Costa Rica's a lie.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian, what do you think?
What was the one that I said it was certainly a lie?
I
Was it
want to
about
be wrong.
The pastor
I want to be wrong.
eating his
No,
meal
that
on a
one is
silver platter?
believable. I don't think it was a Slingshot partner church, but that one's believable.
I mean, Monty telling me to bring my wife, a church in California saying I was too serious,
Probably true.
I just can't see you as being too serious.
Okay.
Was it a different time? Were you different
No.
then? Yeah. I'm going to go with that one as
Okay.
the lie.
Okay. You were both wrong. Now, the lie is a little tricky. The lie was about the pastor eating his meal on a silver platter.
Was it not on a silver platter?
It wasn't me. It was somebody else.
Okay.
It was their story. But it was, I know that person. That person is a very reputable source, and it was true. And when we're done with this, I'll tell you more behind
Yes.
that story. But
When we're out of the red.
yeah. But yeah.
So you were told you were. So how did that make you feel?
Well, his context, so it's a church in San Clemente, California.
Okay.
And he said, look, we're very beach vibes here. Like people go surfing on Sunday morning and then they come to church. And he said, I totally get your, spirit and your heart behind worship. Like you want to create this kind of like Hillsong United kind of vibe and just, big production and everything that goes with it. He's like, that's just not our vibe. Like we're not that serious. And
Interesting.
yeah.
So it was more that you took what you were doing very.
Yes.
Not okay.
Yeah. You want
See,
to kind
this
of
is
that,
why it's good. This is going to be a really great segue into our conversation today, because this is why it's good to always ask follow-up questions before you give definitive answers, because we got some context in that would have probably changed that. Because I'm thinking nobody's looking at you like these people listen to this podcast. They know.
Yeah.
No one's looking at you and saying, you know what's wrong with he's so serious. But I do appreciate that you take your ministry seriously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's good. Okay.
And I did seriously consider an option in Costa Rica. And it was mostly an American church, like a lot of just expats in Costa Rica, people have moved down there. And
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. The sermon and everything was in English. And my wife and I were like, man, that sounds awesome. Just being in Costa Rica and living the easy life. But we decided to stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you did.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Though being invited to Costa Rica to record this podcast would have been a joy.
Yes.
Next time.
I mean,
Next
I can
time.
invite you guys, but you'd have to pay your own way.
yeah.
And you'll be on Zoom talking to me back
talking
here.
to you. Yeah.
Okay, guys, you both are way too good looking for a podcast that doesn't film. So give us a quick snapshot of your ministry background, what you've done in a minute or less, and what led you to your role at Slingshot, and what do you guys do there?
Yeah. So I've been in worship and creative ministry over the last 20 years. My background is as a worship pastor, and I've served a variety of churches all over the place. My wife and I are from Maryland. We've been in ministry together for 18 years and have been married this November 17 years. So we started ministry together in Maryland. Then we moved to South Florida. We're part of a fantastic church in Palm Beach. And then when we moved to Dallas, where we're recording this, we've been on staff at a couple churches here. But throughout the last 5 years, I've been serving with Slingshot and ran into the Slingshot team when they came to do, we had a thing called improv leadership at the time. They did a workshop for that. And I got to meet Tim Foote, who is now CEO of Slingshot. He was in my role at the time, leading the worship experience division, as it was called then. And as soon as I met him, he was like, I'd love to talk to you. And I'm like, first of all, you can keep talking because you've got an awesome accent.
Those Aussies.
All the Aussies. But immediately knew, like, these are my people. The love for the local church, the commitment to doing the work that we do well, to getting into sticky situations and helping churches and leaders get unstuck from that. Man, it was like, absolutely, these are people that I'd love to work with. And then as my time with Slingshot progressed, I got the invitation to step into full-time, and then now into my role where I serve with Phil on the executive team for Slingshot as VP of Worship and Creative Arts. So yeah, it's been a blast the last 5 or so years.
Awesome.
That's great. Yeah, I've been a ministry kid for all my life. Dad's a pastor, mom's in children's ministry. So I grew up around the church, spent a lot of years to try to avoid going into it, and then found myself in full-time ministry. So I've been in full-time ministry now for over 18 years. First being in like communications, worship, production. I kind of did all the roles, and God just had a cool way of kind of given me the background to set me up for the context of what I did as a creative arts pastor, and then even writing a book called Rethink Communication for churches to help them rethink how they communicate, how they communicate their message with clarity and effectiveness. And that's how I actually got connected with the team at Slingshot. So a couple of people had read that, reached out, and I just got connected with them and just felt a huge resonance for a group of people that just so passionately wanted to see churches and nonprofits and teams thrive. Yeah. And so I was hitting a point where I'm like, I want to make a dent in helping somebody or some place. Just want to pave the way in front of them to be able to help their team, their leaders thrive. And so we just hit it off, and that quickly led to me getting engaged with them and moving into more. So now I'm in a VP of marketing role where I get to just kind of play a role in a little bit of everything, and also be able to work with some creative and executive teams as well too along the way.
And give us a quick, overview of what Slingshot does. I think I got into trouble last time when we had Tim on the podcast, and I called Slingshot a headhunter agency.
I heard it.
Yeah. I know. Wah, wah.
We believe really that every remarkable mission that a church or a nonprofit has deserves a remarkable team. You just can't. A mission alone isn't good enough. So they've got to have a team to be able to help deliver on that. And so what we do is we just come alongside churches and nonprofits that are trying to build that remarkable team. So we help them find and hire great leaders, and we help them create ways where we can coach and support them along the way as they try to accomplish their mission. So there's a hiring aspect, there's a coaching aspect, but really at the end of the day, we just try to be those partners with them behind the scenes to be able to help them thrive and accomplish their mission.
Great. And because he's not here to defend himself, my co-host Blake and our brand director, do you guys do candidate searches for podcast co-hosts? Because I'm looking to replace him. And with Brian's voice this morning, he is a strong front runner.
I feel like
welcome to the Church Gear Podcast.
That's beautiful. Okay, guys, let's talk about jobs and hiring and all that stuff that we don't like to think about, but is a reality when you work, which most of us do. So my first question is, the grass is greener, right? When you're in a ministry position and it's starting to just feel like, I'm not loving this anymore, and maybe it's better at church A across the street, how do you know when it's time to actually consider, like, okay, it might be time to go, versus how do you know, like, no, I think it's time to fix this?
There's an interesting dynamic being a homeowner, and looking outside and seeing my grass and being frustrated is actually being frustrated with myself, because I'm responsible for the grass. And so looking at your ministry and then comparing it to someone else's ministry and go, well, it looks so much greener over there. Well, maybe they're doing a better job of stewarding their ministry than you are of stewarding yours.
Yeah.
And I think whenever we're considering transition, change, the first place we have to look is at ourselves and go, am I doing the best I can with what God has put in my hands? And until we can answer that question with an emphatic yes, it is almost always time to stay put and do the work of nurturing the grass that God, even if it's a small postage stamp yard, even if it's the tiniest thing you can imagine, there is still something to stewarding that well. So I think once you ask that question of yourself, if you can answer that with a yes, I'm doing the absolute best I can, then that opens up opportunities for you to be able to explore what God may be doing in terms of transition or change.
That's good.
And if, I'm in a ministry position and I've been at the church for 8 or 9 months now, and I'm just frustrated because I don't have a great relationship with my creative arts director or my worship pastor or my XP, as a production guy, and I'm thinking like, maybe this just isn't the right fit. Maybe I need to find somewhere else. Like, is that even long enough to have built any sort of relationship? What do you guys feel like, you really should try and invest X amount of time before you know whether a relationship is going to work or not? Or is that a time thing?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a set period of, hey, here, give it this long and then you can make a definitive decision. Because I think, whether you're there 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 decades. Like conflict and tension in an organization shouldn't be a surprise. It should be an expectation. Like that's not something you run from. It's something you lean into. And when it's something you lean into, sometimes you realize that it's God doing the work in you and through you, and it may not resolve the situation around you, but it's still work that God has to do in you before he can move you. And then sometimes there's work that you can do working through that conflict, whether it's 2 weeks or whatever it is, whatever the time is, that will actually change culture because your behaviors change for how you handle that situation. So I just believe culture is behavior. It's how people act. And when you can step into an organization and build relational equity, add value, create influence, all those things, like you might actually, instead of bailing, you might actually be the solution. You may be the reason why things can improve and get better. But it takes an open-handed posture just to, like Brian said, be a good steward of the opportunity and the responsibility you've been given. And a lot of people bail because of being frustrated with somebody else's responsibility and not owning the thing that actually God placed in their hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so for two of the most attractive men in the ministry field, tell us how a candidate can be attractive to a church. What are some of the to-dos and to-don'ts of, interviewing if you actually want to get the job?
The first thing that I would say is if you don't have a good sense of self-awareness, it's going to show up. Because, in an interview process, the one of the biggest pieces of feedback we get is, they don't have EQ. Like they couldn't read the room. They didn't step in, understand the situation, or ask good questions. And most of the time we can look back to that to be able to say there's some lack of self-awareness of who you are, who God created you to be, and also who you're not, and being okay with that, and using an interview process or conversations with us or others to be able to know, okay, this is what would or would not be a good fit. What makes you attractive is knowing who you are and who God called you to be. Absolutely. And knowing you can't be all things to all people.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would add doing your homework, like to show up unaware of who you're talking to. Like you got to be aware of yourself, but you also have to be aware of the organization, the church that you're showing up with. If you've not done the time to read what they value, how they express themselves in worship or in their production or creative arts, then what you're communicating is you're not serious about the role or the opportunity. And if you don't do your homework, then you don't know what questions to ask, which means you're only going to answer their questions. And then they're going to be looking for some of that push and pull. You're not going to be able to provide it. So showing up, like Phil said, aware of yourself and aware of who you're talking to, I think that's important. And we see it all the time where amazing candidates that could be fantastic fits for the organization they're interviewing with blow it on the first phone call. Because they show up without information, or they show up and they are treating it like they're going to coffee with the friend.
Yes.
So the professionalism is not there. The appropriate level of care and consideration, even for time, like they show up to the Zoom call, 2 minutes late, 3 minutes late instead of early. Like those are things that, because church world, we tend to go towards like the kumbaya around the campfire feel. And that's great if you've got relationship. You can sit down and chat with your lead pastor, but that's not your lead pastor yet. That's someone who's trying to figure out if you're going to come and add value to what God is doing in their midst. And so showing up, respecting that is so important. And I've actually seen the way someone show up actually help them cover for the places they might be a bit deficient, where we know we're going to have to engage some coaching with them, but how they showed up communicated so much about their work ethic that the organization was willing to take a chance on more of a development candidate.
How about with resumes? What are some of the, terrible habits that people get into with resumes?
I think one of the biggest thing is trying to show too much. Anytime that an organization is looking at a resume, they're rarely looking at one. They're looking at multiple, and they're comparing what makes this person stand out and is it worth a conversation. And so I think people that just think more is better usually get lost because they don't read anything. It just feels like that's too much, or I'm not getting a sense of the story that person's trying to tell through their work and what God's doing in their life, and if that's a fit for us. So trying to do too much is definitely one. The other piece is people overlook the cover letter, or it's the stuff in between. It's the things that take 10 minutes to just show, hey, I want to stand out and make an impression to let you know I've done my work. Like, this isn't just another resume. This is something I've thoughtfully and prayerfully considered, of saying, hey, I'd love to explore this if this is something you're open to. So I think that's the piece that probably people overlook, is not actually on the resume. It's in between it.
Yeah.
First of all, I mean, shameless plug here. This is a great reason to work with Slingshot, because the way that we present candidates to the organizations that we're partnering with is not just a resume, and it doesn't feel like the cold call, right?
Yeah.
We take the time to get to know the leaders that, the candidates, and to help assess the great match for them. And then we present them to the organizations and act as that liaison. So
with context,
with context, important context. But to the leaders that are just kind of trying to figure that out, I love what Phil added about the personalization. I would say, even to take that even a step further, a lot of people focus on accolades instead of outcomes. And so, like, let me show you all the beautiful and wonderful things about me. Most hiring leaders they don't care about that. Don't just say I'm a team developer. Like, you have a job that's there. Write what you did I took that team from 75 people to 150 people over the span of 6 months.
Yeah.
That is going to speak so much more about your leadership than just say, I developed teams while I was there.
Yeah.
And I led services. I led 6 services a week, 50 weeks a year, in a room that seated, 2,800 people. Yeah. Just that level of outcomes and specificity is going to go a long way. Unfortunately, evangelistics is a word I like to use when we describe the people that came to an event, and the pastor's like, there was over 30 people. I'm like, buddy, you can count that. Was there 32? Was there 35? Over 30 people is like, but we try to do that on our resumes, and what it's going to read to the person that is trying to kind of scan through that is, oh, is this person like an exaggerator? Are they someone that's kind of blowing smoke that, you doubled the team size, but it's just because your kids started serving in production? Like, that is what you're up against, because so many people do that. They bloat the information as opposed to focusing on what the outcomes actually were.
Yeah. I love resumes I get at Church Gear, and under special skills, they list Microsoft Word. Like, that's not a special skill.
That'll get the job.
But one of the things and this may be me personally, and you guys can let me know what you think. I love when they put, their Enneagram results and their working genius. It's like they already have some self-awareness, and they put it right there. And it makes me it helps me understand who they actually are as opposed to what they've done.
Well, think about if it's for a church role, most churches have some kind of lane they live in when it comes to assessments like that, whether it's Enneagram, working genius, Myers-Briggs, DISC, any of those things. I will tell a lot of people, a lot of resumes we've looked at, or things we've had, are like, I took one like 4 years ago. I never really gave it. I don't remember. What does that communicate to an executive pastor that values that because they want to know you and understand you and know what it's like on the other side of you, when you don't have the willingness to say, hey, is there an assessment that I could take that would help you discern if I would be a good fit? Or actually, here, I went ahead and took 3 or 4 of these. Here's what I said. Here's what it shows up as. And it shows some willingness to say, hey, I want to be a part of a team, not just, hey, you just adapt to me. So that can go a long way in figuring out if it's worth your time or a waste of your time, because you may not be the right fit based off of that.
I think especially for creatives, it's going to give you a leg up, because I know so many worship leaders who have gotten every job based off of their platform ability, but more and more and more and more, what is required of the local church worship leader or production leader is an ability to lead people, to steward resources. It's not just enough to show up and sing pretty. You've got to go behind the stage and know how to pastor people through difficult situations. So showing that you've invested in your leadership, that you've taken courses, that you've worked with the coach, that you've taken these assessments is going to communicate that you're as serious about your off-platform leadership as you are on your on-platform leadership, which again, I'm always looking for the things that are going to help candidates stand out to the right organization. And I think that that's definitely one that would be like a top 5 for me. Invest in that side of your leadership, and the benefit of your self-awareness growing and increasing is also included there.
Yeah. Let's talk turkey, boys. When and how should the salary discussion be brought up?
With between a candidate
and a church.
Yeah. So if you're in a state, there are certain states across the country that now require compensation be posted on every public job posting. So that does make that conversation.
But they can make it a pretty wide range, right?
It can be a pretty wide range, but it does have to be an accurate range.
Okay.
Organizations can get in significant trouble if they pay someone above or below that targeted range, depending on. This is not legal advice,
sure.
But depending on the state or city that they happen to be in. So when compensation happens, it can be a really tricky conversation. I do want to acknowledge that for the leaders, especially if you're going this on your own, you don't have the benefit of working with someone who's going to be helping you process that, like the intermediate, like we are able to provide. So when compensation should come up is I would suggest once you've had the initial conversation and you're feeling like, you know what, this could be the place, and that church organization seems to be communicating that, I don't think it's off limits to ask for a range. Like, what are you thinking about in terms of compensation for this role? Now, you have to realize that could be off-putting to some of the more classically minded pastors or leaders who are like, well, we should talk about money after the fact. And if you are a pastor or leader that's listening to this and you're hiring teams, it's important for you to know that mentality is going to cost you some great leaders.
Yeah.
Inflation, cost of living increases. We were talking about that before we went in the red, just about how local communities that used to be easy to afford, are now doubling, tripling in value. The home values in our neighborhood doubled over the last 5 years, purely because we had people from coastal cities come into Texas and they brought their coastal money with them.
Yeah.
Great as a homeowner now would not want to be someone that's trying to get into this market. So not being offended by the question, I think where the challenge will come is if you start to make demands too early instead of asking questions. So if you ask the question and they're not ready to give it, then you can ask the hiring leader, when is a good time for us to talk about it? And here's why. I don't want us to get all the way down the road and then realize that we're going to be incongruent. This is not about the money. It's just more about respecting your time.
Yeah.
Couple quick things to add. If that's your only question, don't ask it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So if you are thoughtfully already asking questions and in a dialogue back and forth, that's okay to say, hey, I want to make sure I don't waste your time at all. Make it about them, not you. And at that point, if it's early, keep it broad. They may get more specific. And some leaders or pastors are like, hey, let's talk about it right now, right away. I don't want to waste my time either. But read the room and get a sense of how they're feeling and at what stage of conversation you're in. And if you feel like it's going to be vital for you, it's okay to make that a question of saying, just like Brian said, if that's one of your questions to consider on that. But yeah, don't do it. Don't make that your only question.
I mean, it goes back to what you said about this is why self-awareness and EQ, emotional intelligence, is so important because that's going to give you the indicator.
And even in the Slingshot conversations for roles that we're working with, we try to step in front of those conversations just to say, hey, where do you need to be to consider making a move like this? And it may not be a specific number because rarely do you even know that yet or that early, but that can help create alignment with what we may know the organization needs and save some trouble to say, hey, this is not going to probably be the best fit for you. It's not going to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. And how often do you work with candidates that just have an unrealistic expectation of what ministry pays?
Yeah, it happens.
It's very difficult to find a 6-figure ministry job. I'm not saying they don't exist, but it's, at least in the production world, it's very uncommon. You have to be
in
a
the production world.
very high level leader.
I think what's interesting about that conversation is that you have both sides of the table that aren't doing the work to be educated on reality.
Yeah.
Right. If I talk to a leader, there's a specific conversation coming to mind where they're in a very high cost of living area of the country, like crazy high.
Yeah.
And when I asked about what's the salary range, and they give me a number that I'm almost certain is going to be below the poverty line. Very few times is it intentionally that. What it most often is, well, this is what we've always paid this role.
Yeah.
Or this is what we paid the person that was there. But they left, they started 7 years ago, back when it was a much different space. So the churches, either can't keep up with the education or just frankly cannot keep up with the cost of living increases.
Yeah.
And then the candidates are really, unfortunately, not aware of the realities of ministry. You can find the job that pays what you're looking for. The problem is they might not be looking for you.
Yeah.
And so if you're not willing to have realistic conversations with, not just what do you want to get paid, but like Phil said, what do you need? What is it? What's going to make it viable for your family to live there? If you can come with numbers and realistic approach to that, I most often see the organizations try their best to meet in the middle.
Because money is part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture.
Right. Yeah.
A total package of benefits of, setting up your family, a location that fits. I can't think of many people that the salary was the primary reason why they went to the role that have stayed in that role.
Yeah.
It's just not enough to keep you when the days are hard, when the role is challenging, when you're that's not going to be enough. So if that's the only thing that you're considering or needing to figure out if that's a yes for you, then you're probably limiting the other key parts of the picture that are going to keep you there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's the benefit of the 6-figure income if you're going to be miserable?
Yeah.
Like, can I tell you, it's just not worth it. It's much better to go where the mission is aligned, your values are aligned, and you can really trust God. I mean, I know people have misused this more as like an incentive, but the truth is you can actually trust God to provide for you when you are going to what he's calling you to. And so I remember a time we went to visit a church, we ended up joining, and they made the offer to us. And we said yes before we had ever talked compensation or anything, because it was so clear. Like, we got off the plane for our first visit there. My wife and I both were driving to the church, and we broke down in tears because it was so clear this is where God was calling us to. So as soon as they said, hey, would you be interested? We were like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like, don't you want to know? I was like, sure, but God is actually going to, and he did faithfully provide for us. We never went without what we needed, even though, like, you might look at it and go, on paper, that was wild. Yeah, but it's an adventure of faith to do what God has asked you to do. And he pays way better than any pastor.
Yeah. So we have 2 job openings at Church Gear. One pays $19,000 a year. The other pays $1 million a year. But the two of you don't know which one you get. Are you both willing to jump in for a 50-50 shot? And Tim Foote said it was totally okay.
Tim said that it was...
It's okay if you guys...
Are we still playing 5 truths and a lie? Because let me know. I can tell you exactly what, No, but I have a bridge I'd also like to sell you after this. If you
Great.
If Phil wants to take you up on the offer, I'll talk to you about my real estate business. I sell bridges to nowhere.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And but Tim did say this podcast will be used for your annual review, each of you. So good. Yes, how you do on this with as direct correlation. So guys, we like to wrap every episode with something we call a tech takeaway, and it's your unique piece of advice for our production community, our listeners, on how they can make their Sundays better, how they can make their ministry jobs better. Do you have an overarching piece of wisdom up here that you'd like to pluck from your wisdom hat and share with our audience?
where my mind goes is more the heart versus the technical side of this. Of don't forget who you're fighting for, who you're lighting for, who you're producing for, who you're doing sound for. The guiding thought that I just have when it comes to church is I want to advocate for the person in the back row with their arms crossed. I want to think about that person, because when I think like a producer, I think, oh man, those lights look good. Hey, sound, I want it hot. Like I'm thinking about things based off of my preference versus my purpose. And my purpose is more driven towards honoring God, putting Jesus on display, and advocating for the person to take a next step towards him. And so if I think about fighting for the person on the back row with their arms crossed, I filter differently away from my preferences and more towards my purpose. So that might guide for you what you do and how you do what you do, what you spend your money on, what you're worried about. But more than anything, I hope it can help you remember why you're doing this in the first place. So that's my tech advice.
I like that.
I want to go back to the grass.
Okay.
When the grass was greener. And I think in today's ministry space, it is so easy to find much bigger lawns than yours. Mm-hmm. The church down the street, the church on YouTube, the church that does all the great conferences, the church in your city that has the room 3 times the size of yours and 10 times the budget and 50 times the staff, it feels like. A thing that I find myself going back to often is the parable of the talents, and the master commending the person who had 2 talents and turned it into 4, and commending the one who had 5 and turned it into 10. The beautiful thing about that to me is that they had 2 very different outcomes, but they both got the same commendation because they faithfully stewarded what the master had put in their hands. The only one that got rebuked, that got the slap down, was the one who took the 1 talent they had and buried it. And so if you're the production leader listening and you're burying that talent that's in your hand because you don't think you can get 10 out of it, God is not asking you for 10. He might not even be asking you for 4. He might be just asking you to take that 1 and make it 2. Our responsibility is to steward what he's put in our hands. Our responsibility is the input. His responsibility is the outcome. Mm-hmm. So you can trust God with the little or the big that you have. So don't fall into the trap of comparing yourself to someone else's lawn. Take care of the one that God's given you.
Sage advice. It's kind of like the Church Gear podcast versus Joe Rogan. Like, we've each been given talents, and Joe has a few less than the Church Gear podcast. Sure. But, he does what he does with what he's got.
He's not sitting talking with us.
No, absolutely not. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. If people are interested in Slingshot Group and potential candidate searches or other things, where should they look?
It's good. Slingshotgroup.org. And we'd love, it's our greatest honor to come alongside you, whether you're a candidate, church, nonprofit, whatever it is. We're in it for you and with you.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I feel really good about your performance review coming from Tim. So I think he was actually a hidden camera here. He watched the whole thing. So
thanks for having us, Toby.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
All right, Blake, so you got incredible advice on this episode of reasons you should stay, reasons you should go, like salary discussions. Do you want to consider looking for a new job, or are you going to double down on Church Gear?
Now that you've done 2 episodes without me, I'm definitely leaving. 1 was a nice break, but 2, how dare you, Toby?
So I heard they're hiring on The Footballers, your favorite podcast.
Oh, they were hiring actually for a social media guy back in the day, and the you had to move to Arizona, and I was like, I ain't moving to Arizona.
I know, it's awfully hot. Well, for certain parts of Arizona, but I assume they're near Phoenix.
Oh yeah, they're in Phoenix.
Yeah, that's very hot. So if you were the social media manager of The Footballers podcast, what would be your first order of business?
Worshipping with an idol the 3 guys that I look up to every week. I'm just kidding. I'd be sharing the episode to their millions and millions of followers and be like, hey, you should use this. You should use this. And they'd be like, that's not how we do it here, Blake. You're fired.